I remember connecting to the elders in the civil rights movements and hearing their stories about putting their bodies on the line in the face of the most horrible conditions in the South. I remember singing freedom songs with them. I learned about the work that people are continuing to do. And suddenly, for me, it became very clear, as someone who didn't feel connected in the US and didn't feel connected when I went back to the homeland, actually, in those elders' eyes, I saw my auntie's eyes, I saw my uncle's eyes, I heard my mom's stories, I heard my father's stories. And I began to see that Mississippi was Gaza. Then the 9/11 happened. I remember my dad's security clearance being taken away after working for a company for 30 years, simply because he was Syrian and a threat to the state. I witnessed my childhood friend getting swept away and put into solitary confinement because he wouldn't read out people's names in our community mosque. He now faces a lifetime in jail. I witnessed the president of the Arab Students Association, a dear friend of mine, get beat up almost to death for the color of his skin by a bunch of frat boys. And the administration in this liberal arts college, a haven of diplomacy, refusing to call it a hate crime. And all of a sudden I turned into that 12-year-old Reem again. This time it manifested into a loss of my appetite, a severe digestive order that had me wondering if I'd ever eat again. I think for me, kind of in retrospect, being deprived of food, it's being deprived of your culture. It's being deprived of people, right? Because you become isolated. Food is so part and parcel to the way our communities connect. And more importantly, it deprived me of a connection to myself. But in the midst of all that fear, I had to do the one thing that I had to do to survive, which was to be brave again and to leave school. My parents were really, really worried about me. But it was the best thing I ever did. So 2003, landed in San Francisco. I was 30 pounds lighter. And a whole lot of traumatized. And so if we can create sanctuary, places where people can feel safe to be who they are and to interact to be their true authentic selves, then we're doing something in the world outside. And my hope is that if we can create the model of what that looks like inside Reems space, then people walk out slightly more informed about Arab history and politics, maybe slightly more informed about the intersections of community struggles, right? People are afraid of that. They're afraid that if we know actually that our struggles are connected, what we could do, right? That they would walk out in the world and impact the other spaces they're in that way. And so our hope is, we don't bang politics over people's heads. We just live them. We live it, we breathe it, we eat it, we drink it, and we engage people in that really authentic way to be not afraid to be themselves. Whether they know it or not, the people who walk into our space really value the empowerment of women, value the empowerment of folks of color, of marginalized communities, of immigrants. And those are the kind of people we want in our bakery. We want people to model that in the world. And then you have people who don't know anything who get converted pretty much right away because our menushe is pretty addictive. And so I say some parts of my business are like the Trojan horse effect, where you get them in, you build that relationship, because organizing is all about building trust and relationships. It's like humanizing folks, really seeing where they come from, meeting them where they're at, and then engaging in those harder conversations. But that doesn't come without its challenges. But it's a challenge that we know is necessary, because if we just preach to the choir, we're not really going to get anything done. We need to reach the hearts and the minds of folks who may feel as helpless as I did when I was 12 years old. I remember 2 2 weeks in, like before we opened, I was like, we were still in construction, and somebody had walked into my shop and was like, oh, what kind of food is this? And I remember, I don't know, for whatever reason I said Middle Eastern food. Like usually I say Arab street food, but for whatever reason, he's like, oh, like Israeli food. And I was like, man, the Middle East is such a big place. Like there's so many countries. How did Israeli food become the coin for Middle Eastern food? And to me, that was very indicative of a trend, right, of sort of the cultural erasure, particularly of Palestinian food. You know, hummus and falafel, it's a very highly contested food. And now, while I know that nobody owns food and like the good and the bad histories, right, whether it be through colonization, through sort of merger of cultures, that food adapts, right, wherever it goes. But I do have, I mean, I do have very strong opinions of particular campaigns to sort of coin foods as something different in order to erase Palestinian culture. And so sort of the Israeli food craze, without calling it Palestinian food or saying where the food comes from, is a really tough thing for us. And you know, we hope to just be proud and call ourselves Palestinian and call it what it is, and hope that people are able to enjoy it. I think that I think it's complex. I think that, like I said, nobody really owns food per se, and that there are, like, people do feel inspired by the food of the Arab world, and they should, because it's amazing. But if I don't see workers from the Arab world in your